Mhm.
Welcome to Parashat Nasso. Just a reminder that we are not at the same parasha as they are in Israel. Anybody know why?
Because of the two holidays, because of the shorter holiday.
Correct. Shavuot felt like 2 days in Israel. Hi, Carol. It felt like 2 days in Israel because it was connected to Shabbat, just like here. But Shabbat to them was not Chag HaShavuot. It was what's called Isur Chag, the day after. And they had a regular Shabbat, basically, just that it was connected to the Yom Tov. They still had to do an Erev Tavshilin so they could prepare from Friday to Shabbat. However, it wasn't Yom Tov on Shabbat. They didn't do Yom Tov davening. They didn't do Hallel. They didn't read the laning of Yom Tov. They didn't do the special Amidah for Yom Tov. They had regular Shabbat davening, and they read Nasso. So we are now reading Nasso. They're already reading Bahalotcha, but do not worry that we will catch up to each other at some point. Basically, what will happen is we'll have a double parsha somewhere. And that's when we'll be online, we'll be aligned. Oh, Judy, you did unmute. Okay, great. If you want to say something, you're unmuted. Okay.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, great. You can stay unmuted as long as there's no feedback. All right. Parashat Nasso and its Haftarah. I love this Haftarah. Again, I love the ones that are more of a story that we can connect with, but this is about Shimshon. And actually, it's not really even about Shimshon, Samson. It's not even about Shimshon. It's actually about the birth of Shimshon and the story that happens, how he is born and what happens around it. So what I'm going to do is first summarize the parasha for you. We don't need to learn the parasha, but let's summarize the parasha so that we can find connections from the Haftarah to the parasha and also see what we glean from this story. I think there's a lot of ways to read it. I'll just full disclosure that I always read the Haftarah in a certain way. And I learned this year when I was researching for the class, there was a whole new insight that I had never seen before. And I'm excited to share that with you. First of all, Parashat Nasso. It's the second parasha in the book of Numbers, the book of Bamidbar. Just one moment. Just give me 1 minute. Still learning how to manage a Mac. So occasionally I bump up against issues. Okay. What is Parashat Nasso about? First, if you remember last week, there was a counting, not an accounting, although it's similar, but a counting of the men between ages of 20 and 60, those who are of army age. We're not going to go into why women weren't counted or what we think about that. We're just not going to discuss that. That was 2 weeks ago, actually, in Bamidbar for us. We did talk about it then, but we're not going to talk about it now. Now, there's a different reckoning or counting of the Bnei Leviim. So if you remember, the Levites were not counted because they did not go out to war, at least at the time. They went out to, you could say, spiritual war if you wanted, and they were in the service of God. So last week, 2 weeks ago, there was actually a counting from 1 month old, but here there's an actual counting of the men from ages 30 until 50. And each one of the branches of the family, the children, were given, I'll tell you what the names are. The names are Kehati, Gershon, good, Gershon, Merari. Yep. Excellent. Thank you. And Katzi, they each had different roles to play. So God also tells Moshe to tell them what their roles are. That was another thing that was done at the beginning. And then it moves into something about Mitzoraim, Tzara'at. Remember, we don't call it leprosy, what we used to call leprosy, but it's not leprosy. Leprosy is a physical malaise, and it is called Hansen's disease and is eradicated with sulfa antibiotics, thank goodness. But the tzara'at manifests itself something similar. Maybe you could call it spiritual leprosy, and it is actually given as a end to those who transgressed certain transgressions, basically ben adam lachavero, things between man and another man, or people and other people, such as lashon hara. there's a list of things. The one that tops the list is Lashon hara, gossip and slander. So command the sons of Israel to send away from the camp every mitzorah and other people who have become unclean, not unclean, spiritually unclean, male and female, continuing on. Then it moves on and says that if somebody commits a sin, any sin against another person or breaching trust against God, that person is liable for their sin. And then it moves on to sota. Sota is a difficult and uncomfortable ceremony to talk about, but I will mention it. And that is, and first I want to say that many commentaries say that the overriding principle here is about creating shalom bayit, creating peace in the home. Now, it's a little odd, hi Felice, it's a little odd to think of how this creates peace. It's about a man, actually this, you can't say here a person, a man accusing his wife, that's the circumstance of being alone. There were some witnesses who saw her alone with a man, and he accuses her of infidelity. Is that true? Is that the right word?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, infidelity. Now, we don't know if it's because other people saw her and they accused, and so he wants to clear her name. That's a kinder read of it. But the whole thing just feels like a really, what, Stuart?
They want to punish a horrible punishment. Horrible punishment.
Yeah, of putting to death. So we want to clear her name, and I guess in most cases that's was. I don't even know if it ever really happened that they did it. But the ceremony is to create shalom bayit, but they bring the woman on public display in front of the Kohanim, or the Kohen, the priest, and he loosens her hair, which is a way of showing unbound, like you're not married. But then they do a ritual where they write God's name on a piece of paper and immerse it in water. And God's name actually gets erased. It's something we're not allowed to do. Remember, we bury things with God's name. The reason we do it is to create shalom bayit. Supposedly, if she was guilty, she would die when this happened. This sounds very much like voodoo and magic. And if she wasn't guilty, then she would not die. And then her name is completely cleared. And then they must go back and live with each other. So all of this, hi Karen, sounds really hard. But let's try to just take away from this, if we can, the idea of shalom bayit. That is sota. After sota comes, anybody remember the next?
Nazir.
Nazir, thank you. And Nazir also doesn't really have a translation in English, Nazirite, not to be confused, somebody who's from Natzrat or Natzeret, Natzrat Elite. That's a Nazarene, I think it's called. And although we might think of that as Nazirite. So a Nazir or Nazirah is someone who takes on themselves to step away from pleasures of the world, and they don't cut their hair. It's voluntary. They don't drink anything having to do with grapes, not wine. I think not grapes and wine or grape juice, any of those. They may not have contact with the dead. They may not be tumat met, not so relevant today because we're all tumat met. We all have the spiritual uncleanliness of somebody who was in contact with a dead body, and that is because we don't have the ashes of the red heifer, the parah adumah. What else? And they have to bring, and they're considered kadosh laHashem, holy to God. And then at the end, they bring a certain offering. Next, we have Birkat Kohanim. Birkat Kohanim actually also has to do the blessing of the priests, which is also something that we often bless our children. And that also has the word shalom in it, just pointing that out, that God will bring peace. It's really so beautiful, those three psukim, but we're not going to tarry on that. And then at the end, there's the Chanukat Habayit was finished, the what do you call it? Consecration? What do you call a Chanukat Habayit? Dedication. The dedication of the Mishkan. And the Nesi'im, the princes of each tribe, 12 tribes, I believe, they each brought their offerings. Anybody remember about the bringing of the offerings, something unusual? Hi, Faye. Yes, Sue. Unmute. Wait, unmute first. Sue, unmute. Yeah.
Each offering is the exact same thing.
They all brought the same thing, and
That's the main thing that I took away, that each one is the exact same thing.
Each is the exact same thing. And Milton, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think they brought from their own. They didn't.
Correct. Very nice read. Yes, they each brought from their own. But and you're right, Sue. I just want to hone that, sharpen it by saying it's not just that they brought the same thing. Anybody else want to add? You're welcome to jump in. It doesn't say the first one brought X and everybody else, here's the list of princes, they all brought X. Rather, the same 6 verses are repeated over and over and over again 12 times, which is what makes Nasso the longest single parasha. Hi, Robert, because it repeats the same 6 psukim, which, by the way, makes it pretty easy for a laner. That makes it a lot easier because the words and the trup, the cancellation notes, are almost exactly the same. Not exactly, but very, very similar. It's only a couple of discrepancies. So even though it's very long, that whole part of multiply 12 times 6, I think it's 6, it might be 8 verses. I don't remember, but that comprises a large percentage of the parasha. And the question, and this is something that people grapple with, and I have my own thoughts about that, it might come up in our studies. Why is it that it's repeated? Why repeat it? You know, many people talk about it, find different ways to explain it. All right, everybody good on what the parasha is? Yeah, questions, we're good? Okay, let's read.
No, wait,
Yes,
wait, wait.
Sue, Pavakasha,
Yeah. I want to comment on the sota,
please,
that the sota.
please.
According to what I
Once
have,
the word, yeah,
according to what I have read, the priest uncovers her hair, and from that, women are supposed to wear head coverings,
nice.
and that's where they got that women should cover their hair.
There
Just
is a lot.
that one sentence.
Well, wait a second. To be fair, our whole kashrut of meat and milk comes from you shall not boil a kid in mother's milk. So, you know, we have other examples of when we take one phrase and bring a whole thing, right? To be fair.
Okay.
You know that people know, I think I've shared this joke that I read on the internet a few times, that God says to Moshe, do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. And Moshe is like, oh, so you mean we have to separate meat and milk? And God says, no, just don't boil a kid in mother's milk. Oh, so you mean we have to wait 6 hours between meat and milk? And God's like, no, don't boil a kid in mother's milk. Oh, so you mean we have to have separate pots and pans and everything? And God's like, yeah, do whatever you want. So I agree with you, Sue. And I also want to say that we do that a lot. The Chachamim, the sages. So it's so interesting because we spend so much of our time dealing with hair covering. Should we cover our hair? How should we cover our hair? Women, do you have to? Do you not have to? In fact, the teens, when I had to ask the Rabbanit on Shavuot night, that was one of their questions, all about covering your hair. Is a wig okay? Is a hat okay? Why is it okay? Why isn't it okay? It was really nice to discuss it with them and the fact that they were interested. But we have many other halachot that there's a whole mountain, even all of the melachot of Shabbat, the 39 creative, categories, and then all that's not written actually in the Torah. The way it's learned is because it was juxtaposed with the work of the Mishkan. So the rabbis, the sages interpreted that you must rest on Shabbat means rest from creative work. So while I'm not arguing that it is, that we learn it, but now I want to explain what Sue said. What it did do, by the way, it lowers it from a biblical requirement to something lower. That's true. So because in Sota, it says that the priest unbounds her hair and opens her dress or something. All of that sounds awful. I don't want to go into that, but it's true what Sue is saying, that it's not only from there, but that's like a main place where we have a Masorah, the tradition that clearly if the priest is unbinding a married woman's hair, that means that a married woman binds her hair or in some way bounds her hair or in some way covers it or makes it. That's what we get se'ar be'isha erva, that hair, that showing your hair, your own hair on a married woman is considered erva, which is like not sanua, not modest or leading to temptation. All right, I just want to, I saw you wrote a question, Judy, I just want to wait on that because I want to get to the Haftarah, but thank you for bringing that. I appreciate that. Yeah, So let's read the Haftarah first, because it is a story. It's something that's easy to read, and then I'm going to ask questions. But I do want you, allow me to finish the story from beginning to end. And then we're going to go back to what is the connection to the parasha and what did we take from it and what did we learn? Okay? Everybody with me on that? Excellent. The story is from Judges, Shoftim, chapter 13, because Shimshon, Samson, was one of our judges. Now, remember, when we say judge is something Rev Stephen speaks about a lot, that judges doesn't mean specifically the way we think of a judge in a high court. It also meant a leader of the Israelites, a leader of when there was no king, let's say. Shoftim comes before the kings, and therefore they were also leaders. They had authority. And remember Dvorah, who was a judge, but she also led them in battle. So we don't expect our judges to lead the armed forces. But at the time, judges were, the way we translate it means judges because they also adjudicated, but they also did much more. Okay, we don't actually read the first verse, but I want to read it to you just so that we know what's going to happen. It's an intro, but because it's not exactly connected with the story, it was not included in the Haftarah. The Israelites again did what was offensive to God, and God delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Now, if you remember, a lot of the book of Judges and even of Kings, and please stop me if I'm speaking too quickly, please let me know. The Jews, it's the same trope that goes over and over again. The Jews did poorly. They went to idol worshipers or other things, and they didn't behave well with each other. A lot of it is about idol worship, which we spoke about actually last week, and it was terrific. Why we might be pulled to idol worship, not me personally, but other people, or at the time. And they were doing something offensive to God. So they're now under the Philistines. So what happens? They cry out to God. And then God brings a savior. Does this sound familiar? Like a familiar story? Different saviors at different.
Yeah.
Great. So now this is the intro, because now we're going to hear about the next savior, but it is not read on Shabbat. There was a certain man from Tzorah, who was from Mishpachat Hadanim, meaning from Shevet Dan, the tribe of Dan, whose name was Manoach. And it's interesting, Ishto akara velo yalada, his wife was infertile and had borne no children. So that's always a question. If she was infertile, she obviously bore no children. So now, one way of understanding it, I don't know, maybe she had a previous marriage where she could have had children, but it's interesting that it's repeated. One way of understanding this is that she's compared to our matriarchs, where also things are sometimes repeated like that. But I'm just pointing it out. I also want to point out already now that her name is Eshet Manoach, the wife of Manoach. Ishto, his wife. You're going to see this repeated over and over again. We know his name. We actually don't know her name. And I want people to think about, please put this in the back of your mind, because I'd love to hear what people think about this as well. An angel of God appeared to the woman, not to Manoach, she's actually the heroine of the story, and said to her, yes, did somebody say something? No. And said, yeah, go on, Stuart. Do you have something to say?
Like what happened with Alicia. Her son died and it brought her back to life. The same angel, Alicia.
I remember that story. Right, but this is a little bit. But this is going to be a little bit different. Alicia was a real person. He brought the boy back to life, and we learned about that. But this is a different story. Although I agree with you, it has magical components. So let's listen to the story, okay?
But Rabbi
Yes.
Bracha, in that story, the Shunammite woman also has no children, and Alicia grants her a miracle.
100%. Yes, 100%.
The same as Sarah, because it's juxtaposed. It follows, the Torah follows the Torah reading, Sarah and the Shunammite woman, and the woman here. That's three.
Yep, 100%. I'm totally agreeing with you. I'm not arguing with that at all. They do all do that, and I appreciate that, reminding people that this is a type scene, maybe it's called. That's something Robert Alter called like meeting at the well. So maybe you could say this is also a type story in the Tanakh. Thank you for reminding us. Okay. An angel of God appeared to the woman and said to her, you are infertile, and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Okay. Now be careful not to drink wine or other intoxicant or to eat anything tameh, impure, ritually impure. Why? For you are going to conceive and bear a son, and let no razor touch his head, for that boy is to be a nazir to God from the womb. In other words, you're acting like a nazirah while you are pregnant with this child, and then he will be as soon as he's born. He shall be the first to deliver Israel from the Philistines. He doesn't finish the work. So I wouldn't have translated he shall be the first. He will begin to save. It's interesting that they said he'd be the first. You could look at it that way, but another way is lahatchil, to begin to save Israel from the Philistines. The woman believed the angel clearly and told her husband. So interesting. She says, Ish ha-Elohim. So Ish ha-Elohim is also called a Navi, a prophet. So that's an interesting point that she uses that. It's maybe she meant it as an angel, but it's just interesting that Ish ha-Elohim is used in different ways. Umar'ehu kemar'eh malach Elohim. He looks like an angel of God. Nora ma'od, very fearful, terrible, frightening. So this is also, just please notice, I did not ask him, Zehu, where he's from. Ve'et shemo lo higidli. And he didn't tell me his name. I just want you to notice that. Because she doesn't have a name, and he didn't tell her his name. But why is that important? And why did she say that to Manoach? These are all things I want to come back to. He said to me, you are going to conceive and bear a son. Drink no wine. By the way, she skipped the part where he said you're barren. Notice that as well. Drink no wine or other intoxicant. Eat nothing impure, for the boy is to be a Nazirite to God from the womb to the day of his death. Now we speak to Manoach. Manoach asked God, oh, my sovereign, what did he say? Be Adonai, please God, my sovereign. Please let Ish Elohim, that agent of God that you send, come to us again, and let him instruct us on how to act with the child that is to be born. So it's interesting that he asks that because the agent of God, the malach, actually told the woman how the child should be and not exactly how they should be with the child. So maybe Manoach is asking for more guidance. God heeded Manoach's plea. That says something about Manoach, that maybe he is a bit of a hidden hero. And the angel of God came to the woman again. She was sitting in the field. Her husband Manoach was not with her. So she's out in the field. She's not secluded with him, just juxtaposing this to Sotah. The woman ran in haste to tell her husband. She said to him, the man who came to me before has come to me again. Manoach promptly followed his wife. He came to that figure, Vayavod Ha'ish, and asked him, are you the one who spoke to my wife? Yes, he answered. The Manoach said, may your word soon come true. What rules shall be observed for the boy? Maya mishpat hanar uma'asehu. And what should he do? So again, the translation is not perfect. Ma'asehu means what he should do. The angel of God said to Manoach, the woman must abstain from all the things against which I warned her. She must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, or drink wine or other intoxicant, or eat anything tameh, ritually impure. She must observe all that I commanded her. Manoach says to the angel of God, Manoach, by the way, we know that it's an angel of God. I think the wife knows that it's an angel of God. Manoach doesn't seem to know. He says, let us detain you and prepare a gedi, izim, a kid, a goat for you. But the angel of God said to Manoach, if you detain me, I won't eat your food. If you present a burnt offering, meaning Olah la Hashem, that's an offering to God, just offer it to God. Don't offer it to me. For Manoach did not know that he was an angel of God. But Manoach didn't know, his wife did. So Manoach said to the angel of God, what is your name? So interestingly, we don't know the name of Manoach's wife. Manoach's wife said to him, he didn't tell me his name. We would like to honor you when your words come true. So interesting. Maybe it's about that you must quote someone in their name. I don't know. I wonder, I want you to think about this. The angel said to him, you must not ask for my name. So Peli, do you see that in the Hebrew? In English, it is translated here as unknowable, but it could mean other things. Pele is a wonder. Mm-hmm. So it could be that it's a wonder because he's an angel. And it could be that names are wondrous. Manoach took the kid and the grain offering, mincha. And by the way, Manoach and mincha have the same It's interesting. Although somebody who was manoach means that they passed away, means they rest in peace kind of thing. So it's interesting, the manoach and mincha are juxtaposed. Offer them up on the tzur. They were not supposed to do that. They were only supposed to do it, I believe, in Shiloh. And yet he was allowed to do it here. In fact, the angel said you can do it here. And a marvelous thing happened. So look at the Hebrew. Umafli la'asot. Something wondrous. And remember, he said his name is Peli, meaning his name is wonder. Thank you. While Manoach and his wife were looking, the flames leapt up from the altar toward the sky. The angel of God ascended in the flames of the altar. And that reminds us of Eliyahu. While Manoach and his wife looked on, they flung themselves on their faces to the ground. The angel of God never appeared again to Manoach and his wife, or never again made contact. Yeah, that's another way of understanding that. Manoach then realized it had been an angel of God. Manoach said to his wife, "We will surely die, for we have seen a divine being." So the wife is like a lot more pragmatic, honestly, and said, had God meant to take our lives, and our burnt offering, our olah, and the mincha would not have been accepted, nor would we have been shown all these things, and God wouldn't have told us we're going to have a child. So Manoach, you're not thinking straight. And the woman did bear a son, and she named him Shimshon. The boy grew up, and God blessed him. And here's the lesson: Batachel, remember, or Batachel is more correct. It began Ruach Hashem, the Spirit of God, lifa'amo. So I just want to say, poem, it means to beat, like a pa'amon. It can be like a bell, or it can be that the lev poem, it moves you, but it can also mean pa'am, meaning occasionally, one time or another. And we know about Shimshon that he really didn't have this prophetic vision all the time, that rather it came from time to time. If you read the story of Shimshon, it says Vatitzlach Ruach Elokim, that occasionally the Spirit of God came upon him and he became a little bit like the Hulk when he all of a sudden had this tremendous amount of strength, which he lost when he allowed Delilah to cut his hair. And the Spirit of God first moved him, Pa'amo b'machane Dan, in the encampment of Dan, between Tzorah and Eshtaol. And remember, we said that his father was from Tzorah. Okay, we will go back to the words, but I really want to hear, let's see who else joined us. Joyce joined us also, fantastic. I want to hear any thoughts, please share any thoughts that came up for you. I threw out some questions. I can add, about the names, about the not naming, about how is it connected to our parasha, all of those. Anything else that came up for you, I would love to hear. I just want to say that Professor Uriel Simon, who is a wonderful teacher of Judaic studies in Israel and a professor, when I heard a class from him once it was on that Shabbat where we had a Shabbaton, a weekend away with Kolech, which is the comparable to Jofa in Israel. And he gave an amazing class. Of course, I couldn't take notes because it was Shabbat. And he said it should not be called the story of Manoach and the wife of Manoach. Rather, it should be called the wife of Manoach and the husband of the wife of Manoach, because she's the hero. In Hebrew, you would say Eshet Manoach v'ba'ala shel Eshet Manoach. Okay, Lance, you have something to say, but please stick to the questions.
My question is, why?
No, I'm going to stick to my question.
Pardon me?
No, sorry, go on.
Why is the description of the Nazarite in Numbers radically different
Nice.
from the description of the Nazarite here, in the sense that this Nazarite is womb to tomb, whereas the Nazarite in Numbers is, someone who is maybe 30 days or something like that. Now, they all have this hair cutting and not wine drinking and that sort of thing. But my question is, why the difference?
Okay, great question. I'm holding that in my head because I want to answer you and talk about it, but I want to hear what Robert has to say. Unmute.
Is this I noticed that the infertility is blamed on the woman. Is that I think is generally a time throughout the Torah. They don't assume that there's any problem with the husband's sperm counts.
Yep, or compatibility between the two. Right, nice, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. I noticed that also, thank you, I appreciate that. I don't have an answer for you, but I do appreciate it. Faye.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting that the wife didn't have to be convinced that she'd seen something special, but the husband needed it over and over and over. It's like, almost like he didn't hear anything she said. He had to be convinced. So I thought that was interesting.
Right. That's why Professor Riel Simon says it's about the wife of Manoach and her husband, even though his name is Manoach. Yes, somebody, Carolyn, did you have your hands up? No? Stuart, did
Yes.
you want to add? Oh, wait, who said
I want,
that?
Judy,
Stuart, yes.
Mr.
Is not this time, sorry, the story of Eli. His mother was also barren.
I'm
Eli.
sorry, the story of Eli. Eli?
Eli.
You're talking about, no, I think you're talking about Samuel.
Well, yes, yeah, Eli, yeah.
Correct.
Shmuel,
That's
yeah.
another
He was
example.
also-
Yes. Yes, correct. That's another example. Thank you. Sue.
I have a comparison between the Haftarah and the Parsha with the Sota and
Brilliant, brilliant.
who is, now going to become pregnant. That in both instances, the women are lesser people. And they're
Yeah.
subservient. It's like the woman doesn't even have a name. The other one is going to go through this process, whether or not, and if, it trial by fire.
Literally.
And
Yeah.
women are really degraded.
I hear you. I'm going to offer you a slightly different read, but I totally hear, and I actually am appreciating the way that you compared the two. I have that was for me, the big deal was that, the revelation for me that to compare it to Sota, and you are offering another lens, which I'm really appreciating. I'm going to add to that, but I want to hear what Phyllis has to say first. And Ted, if you also had something to say.
I just thought it was kind of interesting that the idea that the wife not drink wine or anything impure, which comes up so much later in our generation about what the wife, what the woman takes in when she's pregnant and how it would affect the. It was really fun, kind of.
That is so cool. Oh my goodness. I didn't, the actual physicality.
Yeah.
It's actually better. Wow. Oh, that's really very nice. Very nice. Ted, did you have something to add? No. Wait 1 second, Ruby. Ruby, 1 second, because Henry raised.
Yeah, I'm on, just not on my home phone. That's why I'm okay, go ahead.
So 1 second, I'm just gonna, Henry raise his hand and then Ruby. Henry first. But first unmute Henry. And Henry, unmute. Henry, unmute.
Want to say with the Sota, I don't think it's that the woman is degraded. You have to realize that she was suspected of infidelity in the first place. So you can't just say that she's degraded. She goes through this process, but you have to realize that there were witnesses and etc. that caused people to raise suspicion to that.
Yeah, 100%. So in a way, what you're saying, I think, is that she's already been, I don't know if degraded, but she's already been aspersions cast and doubts, and people are looking down on her probably in the community, I would imagine. It's always hard, of course, when we see the inequality, like if the same ritual had been for the man, that just would have felt better that each one of them, but of course we know that men are allowed to, according to biblical law, have sex with as many women as they want. There's no prohibition, even have multiple wives. So that just highlights the inequality between the two, but that is correct, Henry. It's only true after there were, she was probably warned maybe, and witnesses. So it's only after she took this extra step, this extra act. So yes, that is true. Thank you for saying that. Ruby, what would you like to add?
All right, forgive me because I'm not home and I'm on a cell phone, so forgive me for interrupting like that. Okay, we see that the woman, the woman does not question as the man. Are we supposed to take away from this that perhaps stronger religious belief is the one that doesn't question as much? Are we supposed to come away with anything like that at all?
Well, the interesting thing, and maybe I just want to make sure I understand your question, but
She
it doesn't
she
sound
doesn't
like-
she doesn't question the way her husband does. He's the one doing all the question. She does
Oh,
not.
She doesn't question.
She does
Oh,
not.
now I
So
understand.
are
Now I
we
hear what
are
you're
we
saying.
as religious Jews supposed to also feel that perhaps the more religious you are, the less you question these different aspects of Hashem or aspects of what we're reading or learning.
No, I hear you. That's so thoughtful. So let's just talk for 1 second. What this is making me think is that maybe it's two models of how we serve God. Maybe that's a better way. Again, I always thought of Manoach as being this kind of, almost doofus, right? Like your wife sees everything. Why are you not? But actually, that often happens in real life when you have two people, partners or not. One of them sees with clarity something, belief, or like if she really knew that it was a malach of God, she had no reason to question. But if he either wasn't on that level or for whatever reason wasn't able to discern it, then maybe it's actually 100% okay to ask questions. Maybe that's what we can take away, Ruby. And I love that you brought that up. Maybe
So
the
you don't
answer
see any particular religious message to us in terms
No.
of degree of questioning. Okay.
I don't think so. I think his questions were very valid, actually. And that was the new thought for me this time, that the go-to was, she's amazing. He doesn't know what's happening. He's clueless. But this year, given everything I read and also some things that I'm hearing here, we could look at it with fresher eyes. So if somebody else has something to say, then please feel free. If not, I'd like to offer a suggestion. Anybody else have something they want to add? I don't want to stop anyone.
Yeah, question.
Yes, Judy.
Yes, we've been studying this about the fact that the Malach doesn't have a name, but where in other places in Tanakh are there Malachim that do have names? Like when the three Malachim visited Abraham, we only know of them as Malachim, correct? We don't know their name. So is it such an important question to know the name of the Malach, or maybe there are other places where we do know the names of the Malach?
So that's great. And actually, let's compare it to Yaakov, because
Right.
when Yaakov wrestled with the
When he
Ish,
wrestled with the Ish.
and he said, don't go without a blessing. And he also asked him for his name. So I would compare it to that. So maybe going back to what Ruby said, that he asked because if it's a person, it's actually important to know their name, or maybe it was important to him, or maybe names represent more than we were thinking. And I think I want to bracket that for a moment, because actually that connects back to the Parsha, but I'm not 100% sure we have time to go to that. But I agree with you that Malachim are not named. So I don't think it's so much about his answer. I think it's more, I love that Ruby elevated this idea. Are we allowed to question? And I think we are allowed to question. I like that Manoach actually questioned things because he didn't understand, and he didn't just want to take it on face value. But how often does it happen in our lives that one person gets something, whatever that something is? It can be getting a ritual or getting a routine or getting the way we do things. And then somebody else is like, well, I don't get it. I mean, it could be as simple as getting a math problem. That's one way of understanding it. Somebody just sees it with clarity for whatever reason, and somebody else needs it explained to them. It could be about models in history. Like I'm much better at math than I am at history. So very often I need people to explain to me that this happened because it was the time of the Industrial Revolution, or a time of this, or, that other things played into it. So I think I love this, that maybe the question was more important than the way the Malach answered. And yet I also love the Malach's answer, because I love that.
Somebody else have an idea about it.
Wait, Stuart,
Yeah, but-
did you want to answer? Because also Lance raised his hand. So do you
Yeah,
want to
go ahead.
wait a moment? Wait a moment, and then I'll call on you, Lance.
Okay, my answer would be that the name of this angel and all the angels is God's avatar, Satan. And my proof would be Numbers 22:22, in which Balaam's donkey is causing Balaam a lot of problems. And God puts a block, a hindrance, an obstacle. The obstacle's name is Satan, but there is also an angel at the same time. If you recall, in other words, there's Satan. Satan is not a person
Right.
in
Of course.
that
Right.
sense,
Correct.
but there is an angel. And if you go into the Talmud, you will find Satan is in the story of Polimo. And
Wait, 1 second. We're going a little bit of.
Well,
Bring
sorry,
it back.
my
Please bring
tangentiality.
it back.
All I would say is that in what a rose by any other name would smell as sweet.
Okay, I'm just not sure. I really want that takeaway sentence, Lance, of what you were trying to convey. I feel like I didn't get it well. Can you give me one sentence of what you were trying to convey as the answer?
It's all God. All these angels.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's
Totally.
God is in control. If you continue the story, you will find that in Shimshon's life, God is in complete control.
Yes, it says, "Vatitzlach ruach Elokim," the spirit of God. Yes, 100%. And that's very clear from this. I think that's very clear from the story. Thank you. Thank you very much. Milton. Oh, wait, Stuart and then Milton. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Stuart.
I do want to say something. I don't know if it was at the time of the soda was it was a Sanhedrin, but I know I told Sanhedrin, I started Sanhedrin with a Kollel, and said even though there was three witnesses like that, the Sanhedrin did very little. He killed the person that was accused. They were very cautious of killing. So with Sosa, and was there a Sanhedrin at that time? The 71 people or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Is that?
I believe there was at that time. Actually, they abolished Sota that I read for 2 reasons. That's what I read. One of them is that it only works when it's for sure that the husband did not commit adultery, and they couldn't be sure of that. So, like, I don't even want to think of what was going on. Right? Maybe. No. That's true too. I agree. And then the other reason was because women supposedly, because if you come clean, if you're innocent, then you're blessed with a child, and that supposedly barren women would make believe that they were. I don't know if this is true. That they would make believe that they would construe a situation where they would be accused so that they could do sota, so they'd be blessed with the child, which just shows, even if it wasn't true, the fact that they could say it shows the yearning of somebody to have a child. So 1 second. Thank you, Stuart. 1 second. Milton, Robert, you still wanted to speak? Where's Robert? I lost him. Robert, do you still want to speak? Just say yes or no. No. So Milton, and then Lance, if you have something to add, because I need time to say what I want to say as well. Milton.
Quickly, the name Noach has the name of Noach in it.
That's true.
And the story of Noach is a story of a person who, not like Abraham, okay? Also a person who gets intoxicated. He drinks the fruit of the vine.
The opposite. Manoach didn't get intoxicated.
Right, but the story of this whole story of Manoah,
like a tikkun, you're saying, a repair almost. Oh, nice. That's kind of beautiful. Thank you so much. I was thinking something else. It says Noach, but we don't know the name of his wife. It says Ishto.
Right.
That's also true. So, I mean, in addition, very, very nice. Beautiful. Lance, something short?
Quick. Compare and contrast this story with the story of Hannah.
Okay, but not now. I'd love to do that. I think we need a whole other class to do that. And that's true. And that's what Stuart said. Hannah, he was talking about Shmuel. He brought that up. Yes, correct. Ted, you wanted to add something?
Can I present a different view of this?
Yes, present a different view. Then I'll present a different view, and then we'll probably be at the end. Bavakasha,
Right.
Go for it.
So the book of Judges is a book of decline. It's a book that shows the chaos in the country during the conquest. It starts off relatively badly. It ends horribly with a gang rape and the woman's body being cut into 12 pieces. It's just horrifying.
Horrifying.
And you get, as you said at the beginning, you get this constant refrain: the children of Israel did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and they're punished. Samson is pretty much a failure. He's a disaster. He is the archetypal jock. He's got muscles where his brains should be. I mean, Delilah fools him 3 times and then he falls for it a 4th time.
Yeah, it's a hard one. I agree.
Yeah, so he's, and what you're seeing here is the chaos in the country until along comes Shmuel in the next book and institutes under pressure the kingship, which is supposed to bring some kind of order.
And sometimes it did, and sometimes it didn't.
Something, right, because that failed too, because Shmuel says, you don't need a king, you already have a king. Right?
So yes, and thank you. And what I know you're getting at something. So tell us what you're getting
Well,
at.
I just think that what we're seeing here, a lot of these questions that we're raising are indicative of the confused state of the country at this time. And that we have to be very careful not to glorify these characters because they are not necessarily so wonderful.
So thank you. So I heard that an explanation of the different shoftim, the different judges, that all of them had some sort of defect, whatever that means. I don't 100% agree with you about Shimshon, and that would require I don't 100%. I agree with a lot of it. I don't 100%. Rav Steinsaltz has Adin Steinsaltz has a very beautiful read of who Shimshon was. And I think it would be great. Maybe we'll do a class on that. I love personalities. I'm so interested next year in doing perhaps personalities and relationships, because that's what I love most to talk about, and learning it from the text, which is always my favorite. So maybe we would do one on Shimshon as well, and hold that thought, Ted, because that's great. And all right, we have 6 or 7 minutes. Robert wants to speak, Lance wants to speak, and I'd love to just offer a thought to answer some of the questions, even though these ideas are all beautiful. Go, Robert. And I'm so excited, can I just say, I'm so excited that people are talking today. That makes me even happier. Yes, Robert.
Remember the thought, when both parents at different times go and ask the angel, what are the instructions we should do with the child?
I don't think she does. Does she do it? He doesn't ask, does she? One second. He says to her, she doesn't ask him at all. That's what Ruby was pointing out. Hello, Sai. It's actually only he does. And I love this idea of 2 different models. If you get it, if it's clear to you, you don't have to ask questions. If you don't get it and it's not clear to you, ask questions. That's that's my takeaway, given Ruby's question.
As
Is that
opposed to
okay,
the
Robert?
father asked because he didn't believe his wife.
I don't think he didn't. I disagree. I don't think he didn't believe. I'm sorry. I don't feel that he didn't believe her. If anything, he followed her. He asked to see it again because he wanted more information. I didn't exactly get the feeling he didn't believe. That's not the feeling I got. But let's hold that thought as well. Lance, something quick?
Oh, he needed for himself.
Sorry, Robert. Go on. Go on.
My point is just that the instructions for his hair should not be cut, that did not come. And at what point?
What do you mean it didn't come? Oh, she didn't tell him that?
Yeah. And that was an incredibly important information which should have been given.
Yes, you're right. And yet she does say Nazir Elokim. Yeah. So it's 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Mi beten. No, so can I just say, she also doesn't say that he shouldn't have wine. She says, I can't have wine. Right. And when he's born, he will be a Nazir. We know what a Nazir is. Can't cut the hair, can't be, right? So it's in the middle. She doesn't say part of the thing. She only says an additional thing, which is not usual for a Nazir. So I don't know. I'm not sure if that answers you, but yeah. But yes. If you look at the text, okay. I'd love to spend a whole other class on this text, and maybe we will. Yes, Lance, bevakasha, something quick. You're speaking, but you're not. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
Okay, given that what was said about the men, if you look at Devorah and Yael, these are active women, and in my view, the active woman, if you look at the whole Tanakh, is superior to the men.
Okay, great. I'm not going to argue with that. Okay, let me just offer a thought before we close. First of all, huge thanks everybody for really getting involved and thinking about, in all myriad of ways and giving. I really love that. So here's what I want to tell you a little bit about the process that I went through. And I'm also adding to that everything that people said here, that the natural connection that people generally say between the Parsha and the Haftarah is that Shimshon was a Nazir. And this is the only place in the Torah where we hear about a Nazir. Everybody clear on that? That is the general default connection. However, as Lance pointed out, there's actually many discrepancies between Nazirut Shimshon. He's the only one who had that kind of Nazirut. I don't know how to say that in English. Being a Nazir, that's what it means. Nazirut. First of all, a regular Nazir chooses voluntarily. Shimshon was told by God. A regular Nazir, it's never from when they're womb to tomb, right? Because they have to choose it. And the mom is never told that she has to act like a Nazirah as well, because a person chooses it once they're grown. I think you have to be 12 for a woman and 13 for a man to even choose it. And then there's more. A Nazir or Nazirah is not allowed to be Tamei Met, is not allowed to be defiled according spiritually. And yet Shimshon was brought to fight the Philistines and killed people. So he's going into battle. So I think there's more. I'm just trying to remember what else there was. There was a list of 5 or 6 discrepancies. So you could say there's a kind of tangential connection, because the word Nazir. But another way of looking at it is actually it's a play against Sota. So yes, Nazir, we're not saying no. We're obviously there is a connection. Nazir, we get that. So Sota could be about what Sue said, and it's a comparison of the woman not being given center stage. But maybe there's another way of reading it. The example of Sota in the Torah is that the woman is accused based on being alone with a man, and therefore the husband is suspicious. It says if he suspects her, it could be because people brought evidence, and therefore they go through this. But Manoach could have suspected his wife. They didn't have children. And she's coming to say, oh, an Ish Elohim came and told me I'm going to have a child. Maybe that meant she was secluded with another man because she thought, as whoever pointed out, who was it who pointed out that usually it's not the man, Robert? I don't remember who it was, I'm sorry. The man is not considered sterile, but that the woman is always considered or usually considered akara as opposed to akar, that the man is sterile. Maybe she's saying that in order to justify that she's now going to be pregnant. And yet he didn't see that. He didn't accuse her. He didn't bring it to a place of sota. He didn't bring it to a place of, I'm going to be suspicious. Rather, maybe that's the reason she didn't have a name, but she's constantly called Eshet Manoach to remind us that he considered her his wife throughout this whole process. He never thought otherwise. And in fact, listened to her and also followed her in the direction that she was leading him. I don't think it's because he didn't believe her. It's just he wanted to hear it for himself because he had questions. So he wanted to have that vision. And it seems to be that God accepted it because God made it happen. God answered his request to see the malach, and he had an opportunity to ask questions himself. And then they had a joint vision. And actually, that's a positive thing, I think. If you can imagine, a husband and wife are going through some experience. It's wonderful that they were able to experience it together. They could always look back on that wondrous encounter with an Ish Elohim and a malach, that they both saw he was a malach very, very clearly. And through that, Shimshon was born. So I think, thank you, Lance. I just want to leave us with that thought that maybe it's a teeny bit of a tikkun to sota. Maybe there's a teeny bit. I can never justify sota completely, even though I hear what Henry, of course, pointed out that she already was in. But to me, it felt like the first time I felt some sort of warmth, comfort that, maybe that's a reason they were juxtaposed. Maybe there were a few reasons, but bringing in sota, and Sue, you're the one who said it first, at least on this channel, that maybe it's more about the sota rather than specifically the nazir. So I want to leave us with that. I, as always, want to thank everybody for joining. Always just wonderful to discuss with you. We have a few more, but I believe in June, I don't know if I think next week might be our last class. So, because I'm away on a retreat from the Kli Fellowship, which, as you know, was born the Jews of Color One Community Celebrating Diversity initiative that I spoke about in Shul, and that is still very active. And our retreat in person is happening not next week, but the following week. And then I think there's something else the following week, but I'll let you know if next week is the last week.
Graduation.
Yeah, but that's Thursday afternoon. That doesn't conflict with our class. So we'll talk and then
You're gonna be at the graduation?
there's Baruch Hashem. Yes, the retreat finishes at 1 o'clock, so I have time to get back. And I'm very happy about that. And I have some thoughts about next year's class. I would, people can bring suggestions about what this was Phyllis's suggestion. And I think you may remember that in the middle of the year, I found it a little difficult and I a little bit switched direction. And since then, I have been enjoying the class more and feeling like people are drawn in more, which, as you know, is something that I enjoy more than anything else, is when people talk and bring their thoughts and perspectives, and that makes it relevant as instead of me speaking the whole time. That did not feel good to me. So I have ideas. I already told you what I'd like to do is perhaps take personalities and relationships and have that be the topic and use the text to talk about it. So if you have other ideas, Pirkei Avot is always an option. It's also awesome to learn Pirkei Avot. Happy to hear what people think. So let's spend some time next time, and sending love to all.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.